Just think, surveying is not a compilation of lines and curves, but surfaces and objects. These are defined as drawings by edges of lines and curves. Design is creating new surfaces. So if you think in terms of surfaces, you're able to do things that you can't do in GIS or CAD. So this next step, I want you to open beginning step 4. And when you open it, answer no if it asks you to overwrite the current file that you're on. Because again, you don't want to destroy your example files. I want you to click on where it says New Times Roman and a layer pop-up will come. This layer pop-up lets you change the attributes of all the layers or layers individually. Because you want to do things globally, you haven't snapped to an entity before you went into the layers. And we'll explain that in just a little bit. So take a look at annotation style. You can see on the boundary 0, which is green, we want to change that to a bearing on top, distance on bottom. So you'll click the little arrow and a menu will appear. And you want line, top, and then on the bottom, distance. And then you'll hit submit. And now all the lines will have a bearing on top and distance on the bottom. But maybe you don't want that. You'll want the bearing on the bottom and distance on top on those lower lines, because in surveying you want to put your bearings on the outside and the distances on the inside. So in this case, by holding Control down and using the left button of the mouse, you'll snap to those lower 4 lines. Each line, when you snap to it, will turn yellow. And then at the last line, you'll hit the mouse right button to execute. And that's how you snap to things to change an attribute of what you've snapped to. And you can snap to 1 with the left button and hit the right button to bring up this menu. Or you could snap to a whole bunch of things holding the control down. And now we want the bearing to be on the bottom. So you see line, bottom bearing, and then top on the distance. So you'll click that and then hit submit and refresh the screen with Alt Z, or right click the little square on the above bar. And now the annotations are correct. So to globally change something, you go into the layer attributes of the layer that's currently on, and then click where it would say New Times Roman or whatever the font is for that layer. And that changes everything on the layer. Or you could snap to the entity or entities using Control, right click, and that will change the attributes of those layers. So we don't need a by layer mode that's like in CAD, because it's eliminated. So how much extra data is created by adding annotation? None, because annotation is simply an intelligence on the line, and the chance of a bad annotation being displayed is completely eliminated. So in this next example, I want you to zoom up on the area where that house is. So you want to get the driveway. So to do that, you press Z and look at the menu on the right. It says hold the button down, slide to the area you want, and then release the button. So you go to one corner, hold it down, and then release it in about that area that's shown on the box around that house. So you would move the mouse, hold the left button down after pressing Z, and then release the left button, and it zooms on the area. So this is different than CAD. In CAD, you would press Z, then Enter, and then the left button, and then the left button. This is a fraction of the keystrokes. And again, we don't want commands. Commands are a ton of keystrokes and a ton of things to learn. But the zoom and zoom extends and zoom previous is similar to CAD. So if you know CAD, you already know those. It's just you're not executing the command. So what we're going to do is go into drafting, and we're going to extend the driveway lines so that they actually hit the surface of the house. So you can see the little gap on the left, and it looks like the driveway is connected to the home, but it's not. And the reason for that is the surveyors won't be able to get exactly on that line. So we're going to force it by extending the driveway lines onto the house line. So we'll go into drafting, And once you go into drafting, you'll see this key that says extend. So you want to press that. The prompt will say enter a reference line. So you use the left button to snap to that line on the house by the garage. And then you'll hit the left button. The prompt will say the lines you want to extend to, and just snap to those two, and those lines will extend exactly onto the house line. And then you'll hit escape, and you'll see two dots. Those are your protected survey points. They will not be erased. So if you erase unused points, they're not used now in a line work, they'll be protected. So select geometry. We're going to do what's called a split. So you'll select geometry, and then you'll select split, and then you'll point to the line with the left button. And depending on the resolution of the screen, once you point to it, you might see a little blip or you might not. And what that does is splits that line into three separate lines. Now you could do this with lines or curves, and then press escape. Now you've got a closed driveway. So now that it's closed, we can create a surface. So you'll go into surfaces, and then you'll select by name. And because it's a driveway, we'll call it drive, D-R-I-V-E. You'll enter the name drive. It doesn't have to have capitals, or if it's all caps, it's going to change it to lowercase internally. So it's not case sensitive as such. So a capital D-R-I-V-E and a lowercase D-R-I-V-E would be the same. And you'll just snap into it with the mouse left button. Just go into any area and press the left button, and it will fill the driveway with the current texture that's in the driveway. And you might get a pop-up that asks you which line you want. It's because you've gotten the exact same distance between two lines. It's not exact, but approximately. Just press done on the pop-up. It doesn't matter. And what you'll see is as soon as you press into that driveway, it will look like a driveway, and that confirms that it closes. So the driveway is filled with a texture. And that texture, you could choose anything. The area is displayed internally, all areas to 20 decimal places. The output you could select on when you go into File and then Global Preferences, or Edit and then the current job preferences. You can choose how many decimal places you want to go on the output. So if the desired shape doesn't fill, what does that indicate? Like you snap into it, it didn't fill with a color or texture. So what's that indicate? Typically, there are two reasons. The name of the fill does not exist on the fill list. So again, the fill list is where it controls this, and you create your own fill list. We give you, examples on the class, or there's a gap in the surface and it cannot fill. A non-closed area cannot fill. And typically LandMentor is going to show you arrows where you do have a gap. But the problem is, like if you're importing a CAD file that was sloppily done, you might have 10, 15 gaps in that area, not just one. So then you'll have to fix them because a LandMentor does not allow sloppy work. So let's talk about the fills. So press F or press the fill and you'll get a pull down. The list opens up and you'll see color and texture. Each name is represented by a color or texture. Each surface is defined by a closed boundary. So the name is what you want. And these names could be anything that you think of. It can be for anything, for environmental reasons. It doesn't matter. In this class, we use simple names because you could figure, well, bath must be a bathroom, or, walk is a sidewalk, things like that. So some of these are colors and some of these are textures. The more impressive looking plan is going to have more textures. For more of a plan that looked like it came out of CAD, you would use colors, or maybe colors is something you want to pop a little bit more. Textures do take more time for a screen refresh than colors do, but it's very much worth it. While in texture mode, the scale or the size of the texture is shown. So it's going to show you what the texture is, and those textures are going to be simply a JPEG file or just a file you could get off the internet. They need to be tileable. So tileable means you won't see the edges. And the size in feet is the repeat pattern. So if it looks too tight, you might want to try a bigger size. If it looks too detailed, like the grasses, you can see every blade of grass, you'd want to really tile it a lot closer. So you want to reduce that until you get it to where you'd like it. So to change the color or texture or rename it, you can just double click it. Let's scroll down to Drive. You'll note that it's impervious. So each one of these, if you click impervious, it will scroll to ignore, pervious, or impervious. Maybe you want to specifically show all the pervious surfaces, or maybe get a list of things. Impervious is really simple. Basically, it's man-made. So everything in surveying that's a hard surface, a building, a structure, you want those impervious. Everything in design that you want to list is saying, here's the cost, here's the impact, the environmental impact of hard surfaces, the runoff. You want those impervious. So you'll select impervious, so we automatically have an impervious surface on our drive. And when you're done, you simply press done. ZE will zoom, extends, and refresh the screen, and then you'll see the whole screen. Now, a little bit before we go off the slide, this allows a vintage mode, and it's the trigger for your American Planning Association LBCS charts. So when you, for an example, we're going to go and then create a house, you'll right click by name. That's the first time you've right clicked a button, and then you'll snap into the house and hit escape. You'll right click by name, pond, and then click and hit escape. Right click site and the site, and you'll hit escape. You'll refresh the screen, and now you've got the fills. So it's the colors and the textures. You don't like the colors, change the colors. You don't like the repeat pattern, change it. You know, you're in control of this. Now, this next step, you'll see soon how we're going to use the surfaces for geometry and some other really cool modes. And then every time you snap to something, you'll see the area on the upper right part of the screen. So I want to talk about normal mode. This would be your normal working environment, something that looks like this. But you know, some cities are still in the dark ages, and they want surveying standards from 1922 instead of 2022. I'm going to show you a slick little trick, and that is, again, what was vintage mode? Well, in your drawing, you would select vintage mode, and then these different patterns that would already be built in to the driveways, to the pavement, to the lawns, to park areas. And then what happens in vintage modes, it instantly turns into the same plan, but looks like a vintage drawing with the different zip-tone patterns of, 1940. And now you've got a drawing that complies with your vintage attitude of where you're submitting. And then you just simply turn it off and you're back into full colors. Pretty slick, huh? So we're going to talk right now about using the coordinate geometry of the surface that was created. And for that, I'd like you to open beginning step 5. And again, do not override your step 4. So looking around you, again, we do not live in a world of lines and arcs, but for centuries, well, since the invention of a drawing, we represent these surfaces that are around us, whether they're organic or they're inorganic, in terms of lines. And again, the power is to think in terms of surfaces and not lines and arcs. So let's, for example, offset a surface. So you'll hit Offset Surface. Under Surfaces, you'll click anywhere inside the site. Don't click in the driveway because we don't want to offset the driveway for this example. But anywhere in the site, a prompt will tell you to click in the site, and another prompt comes up. So if we just want to offset the entire site, a constant offset, which we'll do in this example, we'll hit submit. If we hit variable offset, one of the lines will turn yellow, and you enter the offset for that. And this works with curves too. And then it goes to the next line, turns yellow, you hit the offset for that, or press enter for the offset that you want. But for this one, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to offset all, so that extra prompt comes up. We're going to change it to the easement. Now keep this in mind. This is another thing with LandMentor. You're in the middle of a prompt and you go, oh, I'm in the wrong layer. So what am I going to do? Get out of the function and then do everything again? No, just change your layer. You know, you're in the middle of something and you go, I'm about to put everything in the wrong layer. Nope, you could change the layer midstream. So we're going to change the layer to easement. The offset distance, you'll enter 25. And you could also offset elevation. We're not doing that here, but so for design or engineering, you might want to do that. And then you'll press submit and escape, and it'll show a dotted line, because that's what's on layer 7, 25 foot from the site. And now the line work is created from the coordinate geometry. The coordinate geometry is the line work. There is no separation. There is no separation. The surface is created from the line work, which is created from the coordinate geometry. It's all the same. So you could use the line work. Once you have an accurate boundary and you have accurate information, you could reliably build your drawing from the line work. And the surfaces are really, when you're surveying, they're then become the basis of the legal description, which we'll talk about later. And because of this, the configuration that you see can be used for precision geometry. So you'll build off of the geometry visually. And what we're going to do here, this next and last exercise of this section, is we're going to have a 3-acre reference to build commercial on the west side of this property. By the way, north is always up. You don't rotate the plan. You could rotate it at plot time for the plotter, but north is always up in LandMentor. And that way, when you can't make a mistake because you've got some kind of coordinate system that is different on the screen than real world. So we're going to go into lots, and we're going to go into trapezoid. And the prompt is going to change quite a bit, so you have to be aware of what that prompt says. Basically, it's saying snap to the first line. And the first line is going to be the reference line. It could be the north line here or the south line. So select the line. Again, the prompt shows the left button. The point on the line. So where are we coming from? Where's our beginning? Which would be that point on the left part of that line. So again, the left button. The second line is going to be the lower line, or if you snap to the lower line first, it would be the upper line. So it's the opposite line with the left button, and then the point on that line. So that will define the left line, and you'll see A or a B, and the direction says A or B. So what we want to do is go on the B side. So you'll snap B and highlight it, and the area you want 3 acres. Now, instead of doing math in your head, what's 3 times 43 by 60? Just type in 3A, A for acres, and that will change it. And the number of lots, you want to enter just one of them, and then you'll press submit. And that will create a 3-acre dotted line, and that dotted line is going to be on layer 7, that easement layer. So that's exactly 3 acres. It's not going to be a hard line because in the design, when we're designing, we might want to move that, but that shows us exactly where 3 acres are. So how many point numbers did you need to be aware of to complete this first section? How many point numbers? If you're in a surveying or COGO package, you're going to have to be aware of those. So there are none. It's designed to eliminate the point number management and concentrate instead on what that point is. So a little bit of review before we move on to part 2 of the lesson. You read in the raw field data. the coordinate data and learn to use the point descriptions instead of the point numbers. Now, LandMentor can do the raw field notes. It can break that down, but typically today you're doing that in the field. You learn how to create a digital terrain model and show the contour lines. You learn how to, edit it and attributes of that. You created a parcel, a surface, and the geometry from its shape. That's what we just did. And you should be aware of the general use and feel of LandMentor. You should start, it's like riding a bike. You should start feeling how it works. So take a break and then let's load up part 2.